Phasing in Revit requires careful planning and management. In part 1 of this series here, we'll look at setup and workflow tips to aid you in effectively navigating your phases in your Revit project. I have Revit architecture open to illustrate these examples for setup and workflow tips. So let's begin with setups. Before we begin, let's take a little bit of an overview look at how phases work. Phases are located on the Manage tab on the Phasing panel inside of your Revit application. When you launch the dialog, this is where you start to create your phases. Typically out of the box, Revit comes with two of them, existing and new construction. Now you can see that I've renamed new construction here to phase 1. But what you got to understand is that phases are major events in the lifetime of a building design project. I've dated them here to give you an illustration as to the difference in time that is occurring between each phase. So in 1982, the existing building was completed. In 1998, phase 1 will be completed, which involves interior demolition and renovation work. In 2012, a new addition will be plugged onto the building to complete phase 2. So, if we see that we have phases set up from the past to the future, how do we view these phases inside of our project if we have one model? Well, let's OK our way out of the dialog and look at the views. The views will be your window in time. And if we look at the properties of this existing level 1 floor plan here, you'll notice that at the bottom I have a phasing group and it has a parameter called phase. And if I look at the value pull down menu here, I can see the phases within my project file. And this allows me to see the building at that point in time or during that major event. So here I'm looking at the building as if it was brand new back in 1982. You'll notice that nothing looks different. It looks all finely detailed. Everything looks immaculate as it would as when a building design is completed. Now to create a view for phase 1, which is my interior and renovation work, I have to go and duplicate that view. So you're going to end up duplicating a lot of views in Revit for phasing, and you're going to see it becomes a management nightmare if not watched or tracked properly. And we'll look at tips at how we can set this up so that it can be tracked and managed easily. So I'm going to duplicate the existing level 1 plan here, and as you can see it looks identical to the original. But I don't want to show the plan as it was shown back in 1982. I want to set it up so that it's viewed as if it's now 1998, phase 1. So I come down here to the property of that view for phase and I set it to phase 1. And as you can see, when I come back into the view, some of the objects have been overridden, and this is due to the phase filter. Okay, and we'll take a look at phase filters to kind of illustrate what's happening here in my new construction view for phase 1. So if I go to phase filters, this is the place where the phase filters are coming from or being derived from. And you can see that you have 7 of them out of the box. And you'll notice that the first column is dedicated to the name of the phase filter, which you can actually access from the phase filter parameter here on the properties. The next 4 columns deal with the status of objects in our building model. So a building element can take on 4 possible states: new, existing, demolished, or temporary. And if we look at the show all filter here, we'll see that new objects are displayed as if they were new construction, so no overrides at all to the elements. Now because I'm in phase 1 1998, my existing elements are old, and you'll see that the state that they are in is overridden. So that's why I see that existing elements are kind of no longer looking brand new anymore in my phase 1 plan here. Also, if I go demolish objects in this view, they'll be overridden, and then finally temporary objects will be overridden. Well, if I look at the word overridden, what does that really mean? What it means is that it's looking to this tab called graphic overrides in my phasing dialog here, and if I click on that, you can see the overrides for each status of an element. So here's the overrides for existing and demolished, new, and temporary. And I have projection surface overrides and cut overrides. And for my 3D views, I have material overrides, which allow me to see the difference in status in my 3D views. So let's continue on and take a look at how status is affected when you look into the objects themselves. So if I click on that wall there, you'll see it's picking the same wall in all my views. I can see that it was created back in 1982 and it has yet to be demolished. So in 1982 it's brand new because that's the phase it was created in. But in 1998 you can see that it looks kind of old and dated because it's overridden, so it's not displaying as new in this case. So let's see how this phase filter affects our views as far as workflow. So if I go and rename this new view that I've copied to something more appropriate. Again, one tip here about setting up your views is to come up with a convenient naming convention that's easy to understand. So I use N for new and PH for phase and 1 for the phase that I'm in. And then because this is my new construction view, I'm going to use a particular phase filter that allows me to show the existing construction as well as new construction side by side. And if I click on show previous and new, that'll do the job. So let's take a look at what that phase filter is doing for me. If I go back into phasing here and I click on phase filters, you can see that the show previous and new will actually display new objects brand spanking new as you would expect, but existing objects overridden. But if you look down into the columns here for demolish and temporary, it shows them not displaying. That means they're going to be turned off. So if an element is actually demolished or is a temporary object, it'll be turned off in the view. So here's another tip. I'm going to need a demolished set of drawings here to show my demolition. So I'm going to take the existing plan for my new construction for phase 1 and I'm going to duplicate that. And by doing that, it saves me a couple picks and clicks. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'll duplicate that. There's my proposed demolition plan for phase 1. And if I come over here, I'll do the same thing by giving it a designator for the name, such as D for demo. The only thing I really got to come down and change other than that is the phase filter. So if I click on the phase filter here, I got another one that's out of the box called show previous and demo. And when I click on that, nothing really happens just yet. But let's take a look at that phase filter for a second. And here we'll see that the show previous and demo is row 5 here in this case, and it'll say that new construction elements are not going to be displayed. So new things created in phase 1 will not display in my demolition plan. However, existing elements will display overridden, and demolished objects will show up as overridden as well. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to end up demolishing some objects in here. Let's take this wall for example. So you can see that it was created in the existing time period, and I'm going to demolish it now in phase 1, which is a little over 10 years later. So if I go to my demolish tool on my phasing panel of the manage tab, I can click on this command and pick this wall. And when I do that, you'll see that the wall disappears in my new construction view. However, over here in my demolition plan, it shows up dashed. So there you can see the phase filter taking effect for that view, and the phase filter for this view is also taking effect by hiding the demolished object. And so that's how phase filters allow you to control your graphics, and it really goes a long way. For instance, another problem I might have is demolishing these materials from my floor, because these rooms are going to be removed in my renovation project. So if I demolish that, you'll see it disappears in my floor plan, but it doesn't look like it was demolished in my demo plan. So how do I overcome that issue? Well, again, I'll return to my phases dialog here and go to graphical overrides. And what I want demolished objects to do in projection is to have their patterns overridden. So I might go and pick a particular color to make it pop on my screen, but also pop in my construction documents. So I'm going to pick, let's say, red for my color. And I'm also going to go and pick a pattern, for instance, this diagonal up small. And if I hit OK and OK, you'll see now in the demo plan that that material has been demolished. So just a little tip there, add some surface overrides to your demolished objects so you can identify them in your plan view. Now a temporary object is something that was created in the same phase but demolished a little bit later in that same phase, let's say, separated by a couple weeks. So let's say that I had to demolish this wall in the future. So if I want to create a wall there to support the roof bearing, I can pick my wall tool here, and I'll just give you an example of what this looks like by using a generic 5-inch wall. I'll set my options, and I'll just draw it in here, let's say from here to here. There we go. Now it's looking like it's brand new construction because it is, because I've created it in phase 1. So you'll see it says phase 1 created for the parameter of that wall. But if I go and demolish it now, it's going to disappear in my new construction view, and it doesn't show up in my demolition plan. Well, this means that my phase filter might not be working the way I expect it to. So we need to go do some real changes to our phase filter. So I'm going to go back to the phases dialog, to my phase filter, and take a look at what's going on with my show previous and demo phase filter here for my demolition plan. Well, it says that temporary objects are not displayed. Well, I want them to be displayed, but I also want them to be overridden with graphical overrides. So if we look at what overridden for temporary looks like, it's going to be this bluish color with these dashed lines and this pattern. So now if I hit OK, there's my temporary wall. So you can see that it's showing up in the demo plan where I would expect to see it, and it's also temporary in nature. So if I look at the properties of it, you can see it was created and demolished in the same phase. That's how we create temporary objects inside of our model. So that's a look at phase filters and how they affect our views. Now let's look at some tips and tricks here on some additional setup features. I got ceiling plans in here, okay? I got my existing ceiling plan. And what I need to do is I need to go and create demo and new construction plans for phase 1 of the ceiling plan. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate this a couple times, this existing reflected ceiling plan. And you'll notice I'm not paying any particular attention to the properties. I also want to duplicate my 3D view here. So I'll duplicate that a couple times. And you'll see that, again, I'm not paying any particular attention, because what I'm going to do is use another tactic to go about setting these views up for my phases. I'm going to use a schedule view, and a schedule view is a great way to get all your information in one spot. Rather than right-clicking and changing and picking and dealing with the properties over here, I can actually schedule the particular property that I want and modify them all from one location. So I'm going to create what is called a view list, and this allows you to organize a schedule to show all your project views. And it just so happens that the available fields for my views are phase and phase filter. How convenient. So I'll pick phase here, phase filter. The family and type of view might be important, and then let's say the view name. I can also add detail level information and the scale factor, any kind of information I need to see to help me make my decisions. Now I'll sort the information. So let's say we want to sort it by phase, and then I'll make a header and a gap between each phase. I'll also go then and do it by family and type so that my floor plans are segregated from my sections and elevations and so forth. Maybe phase filter will be next, and view name. Again, you can reorganize the data any way you want. But just a little tip here is creating the schedule, and you can see how quick and easy that was to build with little or no effort. So you'll notice that I've scheduled the phase, and here's my copies inside of my list of views. So I'm going to move these by changing the phase of them to phase 1, and one by one they'll pop down into phase 1, as you can see here. So here's my reflected ceiling plan copies. I'm going to move those down as well. Now that I got them down there, I can go through the task of setting up their filters. So I'll need a demo and a new construction view for 3D. So I'm going to pick new for that one, and let's say demo for this one. And then the same thing for my reflected ceiling plans. I'll show new for this one, and then I'll show demo for that one. Last but not least, I can rename these. So I'll just go in there and rename them. I'll copy that to the clipboard to make it easy on the next pass. This wants to be demo. This one wants to be new. There we go. We'll make it -3D. And then down here I got my demo ceiling plan, so we'll go in there and make that D-phase 1. And then over here, this will be my new construction view for phase 1 for my ceiling plans. And you'll see the scale and the detail level are indicated as expected right here, just like I scheduled them. So very fast and effective way to go and set up your views when you duplicate them, to go into one location to change their properties so that they're ready to go. So now that I have that squared away, I can click out of here and you'll see that my browser has indicated the changes in real time. However, I got another problem. I want to organize my views better on my browser to help with my workflow. So here's another tip. You can come up here and select the browser views branch, and then come to the type selector and pick a predefined type inside of your project called phase. So the browser is actually a family just like everything else, and it has several types. And you can see here that I can organize my views by phase, and when I do that, you can see that I get a better result and a better organized set of views to work from. So just the last tip there for setting up your project. You've seen how you can use setups for your graphical information as well as for quick duplication and naming conventions. Let's move on to workflow a little bit here. So I'm going to close down this file and I'm going to open up the next file. So here I have a set of views I've already opened, and you can see I'm underway with my phase 1 process here, and I got a schedule for rooms in phase 1, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So let's put that in the back burner for now, and let's get these guys set up side by side. I also want to open up my 3D views to kind of see and gauge if anything is really being affected. So the nice thing about Revit is the ability to see multiple angles of my work as I progress through my design and work on my potential issues. So working on the design is great when you have side-by-side comparisons. So here I got 3D side-by-sides for new and demo, and I got plan side-by-sides for new and demo. So I got to go demolish this wall here. So again, I'll return to the demolish tool. I'll pick the demolished wall to be demolished here, and you see it comes in dashed down here. Now when I look over here though, I got a common wall that's shared by the toilet room, but I need to demolish the other part of it, and this becomes a problem. So what I need to do here is I need to make sure that I split this wall. So here's a tip on how to be selective in your demolition. If I go to the Modify tab, I can select the Split Element tool and split this wall right there. And by doing that, I have two wall segments now. So I can keep this wall and I can demolish this wall, even though it was one wall at one time. So now I'll return back to my recent commands here and demolish that sucker. And you'll see that it disappears in my new construction view, but down here in my demo plan it becomes dashed. Now I have a problem there, so I have to go and fix the cleanup issues. And here's another tip. If you pick the demolished wall and right click on the grip here of the wall end, you can disallow the join, and this will allow you to create that clean corner you might be looking for in your documents. So notice the results in the plan here. So that's just a little tip there to help clean up some issues with demolished walls and existing walls. And you can see in my demolition plan here I have the same issue with that wall I did before. So I'll just disallow the join and yank the end back. And again over here on the far right of this wall, disallow the join and yank it back. So there you go. I have to go and demolish some flooring here, so I'll go ahead and run the command again, demolish the flooring, and it shows up as expected. So using my 3D demolition view, I can actually orbit up and see that the flooring materials are getting demolished, and I can also see the walls inside that have been demolished in red here. That's from my phase filter taking effect. And let's look at the ceiling plans now. So in the ceiling orientation, again opening up both sets of views, I can tile my views and zoom them to fit, and here I can see that this ceiling no longer is encompassed by any walls and I have to demolish it. So I'll just return to my recent commands and demolish it. And the nested elements, or the hosted elements, in this case the light fixtures, are demolished as well. So very good tip there, working side by side with multiple views open to make sure you make the best informed decision that you can. And as I can look in here in my new construction view, I got a clean slate to work with where my renovation work will commence. So now I can close down some of this information demo wise and tile up my new views. So here I'll just make my current view over here be the 3D, and I'll zoom in. So let's start with the plan. And the best way to create construction to fit in with the old is to create similar. So here's another tip when workflow issues arise. Right click on something that's existing and then pick create similar. This will allow me to create the same exact wall with the same exact settings. So now all I have to do is start snapping and clicking. So I'll just trace out that wall there. You can see I got some reference planes in here to guide me along with my design, just to speed up the process. And I'll put some walls over here for closet spaces. I gotta tie in this wall again because I demoed a little more than I needed to, and then I gotta put another closet down here. And as you can see in my 3D view, these walls are starting to populate my new construction 3D view, as well as my reflected ceiling. So I can see what's happening in all directions to make sure that I'm making the best choice that I can without any extra rework. Well, now that I got my rooms enclosed properly, I got another potential issue here. I got an entrance issue to the conference room. So what I need to do is I need to demo that door and provide a new way in. So as you can see, when I start to work in this way, back and forth, I can actually see the potential issues. So again, I'll return back to the Manage tab and demolish that door, and it'll put a filler panel in, and eventually I'll have to figure out a way to get into that conference room again, but for now I'll just skip over it. Now I minimize this schedule for a reason, because architects tend to make a program of spaces they need for a building. They kind of work this out with the owner to decide on what the square footages will be and the number of spaces that will be required, and Revit allows us to do that. And here's how it works. I've already created some existing rooms inside of this model, and while we're on the topic of rooms, rooms are an interesting element when dealing with phase. They only have one parameter, which is the phase itself. So for every phase in your project, you might have to create the rooms over and over again, even though they're existing to remain. So you can see here in my schedule, I got some E rooms, which are existing rooms. They're recreated from the past. Alright, I can't just show them from the past because there's no option to do that. I have to recreate them. In the case of my new rooms here, I've actually built them in my schedule. So here's how it works. I built a schedule and I scheduled it based on the phase. So you'll notice my schedule has a phase. So a little tip and trick there is you can phase your schedule views as well for your elements, in this case rooms. So how do I add more rooms to my program? I click new row up here, and it'll add a new row, and you can see here's 114. So I'll just number it to 1112, and I'll change it to a closet from the database. I don't have to type it again because it's up here. Again, I need another room, which will be another closet. So now that I have my program built, all I need to do now is go in and populate my plan with my program spaces. So in my plan view, I'll go to the Home tab, I'll select my room command down here, I'll set up my options as necessary to make it look right, and instead of going placing brand new rooms in the building, I'm going to pull down a list, and you can see the rooms that I have not placed yet from my schedule in the pull down menu. So I'll pick waiting here. The waiting room was redesigned a little bit. It's not as big as it used to be. Then I'll go to the next one. I'll pick the executive office. It's been redesigned to have a closet now and a little bit bigger. Also the secretary's office, which will be right here. So you can see how quick this is. So this is a little tip and trick you can use to help expedite your placement of rooms. So I'll go up here and make sure I pick it, and that's going to be the closet for the executive office. This one's going to be for the secretary. Let's say the break room is going to be this larger room in the corner here, and then the open office area will be this large area here, and finally my two closets, 112 and 113, that I just made in my program. Very, very quick. Now I can go forward and start modeling in my elements that I need to lay out my design. So in my ceiling plan, I need some ceilings in here, and you can see the new rooms that I placed. So let's just close that down for now. And what we could do now is start placing our ceilings in our plan. So I'll return to the ceiling tool on my Home tab. I'll pick my ceiling type. I'll set my elevation, and then I'll go in there and start placing ceilings where necessary. Let's change the inner ceiling here to 9 feet. You can see in my 3D view here, my new ceilings are starting to come in where I would expect them to come in. Let's make some drywall ceilings inside of the closets here. So we'll suspend some drywall ceilings in here, and here, and here, and here. And as you can see in my 3D view, I have all those things modeled as necessary. So I can check my work in 3D as I work side by side with my plans, sections, and elevations. Now I'll need doorways to get through to the rooms here, so let's just maximize this because we need doors in there. So we'll just place some doors from our Home tab. Again, I'll just use this door for example. I'll turn off tag on placement because I'll do documentation in a later set of videos, and I want to make sure my doors are swinging in the way of egress here. I'm going to need a new door to get into my conference room here, so I'll use a nice double door, let's say. And you'll notice as I place the doors that they're completely open, and this is a great little trick that you can do inside of your families. So I'll come back to that in a second. So let me just place some of these doors here, make sure they're at the right distances. And we need one over here in the break room, swinging out for egress. And then we can start putting some of the closet doors in. So I'll add flush doors for those. So a real small door here. I'll put one over here in the closet for the secretary, and we'll go back to big doors for the main closets down here and here. Okay, so when I pick one of these doors, I've modified the family with a conditional statement and a yes/no statement, or type of parameter inside my family here. So when the door is existing, I just need to check this box and it swings at 45. When I uncheck it, the formula changes the angle to 90 for me. Because a lot of companies like to show 90-degree doors open for new construction and 45 for existing. And that's one way you can accomplish that. Alright, now that I got that in there, we might want to look at flooring combinations. So, adding flooring in for the architectural design. I'll add an architectural floor, and I got several types that I've built in here. I'll just use VCT for the break room, and I'll just pick my bounding walls for my floor. Make sure I get the right sides, of course. This will constrain it to the walls, and I just need to trim up my boundary condition here to make sure that there's no overlapping lines or gaps. And when I finish, I got my floor in there. And as you can see in 3D, there's my flooring material. So if I want to render the space for the owner to see it, I can now render it. Other components we can put in, like furniture. I'll go in and place some furniture in the room here. So let's say we want to put some chairs in the waiting room with the new layout now. So I'll just put a couple of corbeau chairs in there. And maybe we want to add a table for them to put their stuff on or place magazines on. So we'll add a coffee table in here. And you'll see that as I add this to the phase 1 view, all these elements are getting created in phase 1, which makes them look brand new because of the phase filter. Also, my ceiling plan, I can't neglect that. I can actually put components in here. So if I need to put light fixtures in the ceilings, I need to show that. I'll come down and pick my light fixture type, and I'll place it in the ceiling because it's hosted by the ceiling. I'll just spacebar to rotate it and align it into position using my align command from my modified tab. I can also copy that light fixture if I need to put more into that grid, like let's say one over here. And I can continue to do that all across the plan here to make sure that all my lights are accounted for. So very, very rapidly you can see the progression of the design from all different angles as you work with multiple views open. So that's your tip as far as workflow is concerned. Make sure that you have the views open to help you make the design decisions you need to make to see the changes as they occur. Don't be afraid to hide elements to get them out of the way to see a clearer picture of what's happening with your model. Okay, so let's close that up and look at other workflow tips and tricks. Let's move forward in time to 2012. So now we're looking at the new addition. So right now the existing phase and phase 1 are old construction. So let's tile up the views here and take a look at what we have. And I just want to retile these so that they are assigned properly. So here's the demo plan for the reflected ceiling. Here is the demo plan for the new addition for plan views. And it just so happens that I got to break through this exterior wall here so that I can accommodate the new construction which is occurring to tie the old with the new. So this door and this wall section here are in the way. But this wall is bearing, okay? This is actually taking the load of my roof, and I don't want to demolish it completely. I want to demolish only partial parts of the wall so that my engineer can structure the bulkhead that will support the load of the roof. And I'll rely on him for that in a later video, which we'll talk about when we work with phasing and collaboration. So now that I have this problem, one of the views that might assist me in this decision making is a section view. So I'm going to open up the section view here, and I'm also going to open up the demo 3D so you can see what's happening side by side. Again, talking about that tip about working side by side with my views. So I'll just reorganize the views in my display here. And now you can see that I have some references in here to help guide my way. I'm going to use the split tool again to split these exterior wall elements. So I got one solid wall on the outside here, and if you see me hover along the floor line of the wall, it gives me a split line, and I'm going to split it very close to that reference plane there, and I'm also going to split it here. And you'll see in my 3D view I get a nice seam line here, and then on the opposite side I had one there before I clicked away from it. Now what I can do is in this intersection that I split out, I can split it horizontally to create that bulkhead I need. So when I click here along this edge, it now creates a horizontal seam line, as you can see in my 3D view. And now that that's done, I can actually use my 3D view and demolish that section of wall, including that door. So on the Manage tab, I'll come in here and I'll demolish that section of wall, and you'll see that it becomes red. Therefore, when I close down the views, you can see in my demolition plan here for ceiling and plan that the wall's been dashed in. Now obviously I don't want to demolish it completely across because I got to make sure that this room is finished, so I can actually come in here and modify the model a little bit to make sure that it's correct, and I can pull these walls in using the grips on the end of the walls. So that'll help me clean up those issues. Now that I have that accomplished, I can go and finish my design for phase 2. And if I want, I can use the same tactic I used when creating the rooms for phase 1. I can use a program. So again, building on that tip that I created before, I can reorganize my views to get my schedule here, and close down the ceiling plan for a minute. I can go and add the remaining rooms for phase 2, which have been redesigned. So I'll go up to my Home tab, and I'll pick my Room command, set my options, set my offset, and again pull down the menu of rooms that have not been placed yet, which is my break room, and finally my open office. Now if you want to go and break that space down even further with a separation line, it's quite simple to do. I can simply come in and add a room separation line from the room pull down here, and then just trace a line across the corners here. And now I can put another space in here to actually be a quarter if necessary. So as you can see, I can make decisions on the fly to modify my layout if I need to put different finishes here, or different materials on the walls or whatnot. So again, using a room separation line will allow me to break that up, even though it's flowing into the new addition from the old building. So just a couple tips and tricks with regards to workflow. Use your program for your schedules to actually pre-populate a schedule list of of rooms and plop them into the model from the menu pull down in the options bar. Work side by side so you can see the results from one view to the other. Don't be afraid to create schedules when necessary to impact your workflow. Organize the views on your browser. Come up with a naming convention that's simple and easy to understand. And don't forget your phase and your phase filters for your views to show that time in the lifetime of the building. Okay.